board this morning. Mr. Sheppard, you were previously serving a life sentence as a juvenile for homicide, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the board granted you a commutation and the governor signed it, and you were ultimately paroled after having, I'm sorry, you were paroled after serving 34 years, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you released to the Louisiana Parole Project?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did you stay with the Parole Project?
I stayed a little bit, about 3 weeks.
And then where did you go?
I went to the disarmament.
Where?
I had a disarmament in Louisiana. I had a residential plan set up there.
That with the Millers?
Yes, ma'am.
That did not work out, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And they wanted you to leave because of your behavior, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the conditions when you were released was that you attend AA meetings on a weekly basis. When you were released, did you attend AA meetings as directed by?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
For how long?
All the way up to the COVID.
So when was that? Give me specific. You got out in 19.
That was like around the end part of 2021 or the first part of 2022. Or the middle part of 2021.
So you went to AA meetings. Did you provide proof of that to your parole officer?
Yes, ma'am, I did. That was in Donaldsonville.
So when did you start drinking?
I would say it was like 8 months after I was out. After I was done.
So you were going to AA meetings and drinking?
Not as regular. I wasn't going to AA meetings as regular at that point.
So 8 months after you got out in 19, you had stopped going to AA meetings. Is that what you're telling me?
Not altogether. I was still going to AA meetings, but I wasn't going as regular.
You weren't going as directed by the board?
Ma'am?
We're not going to the number of meetings per week as ordered by the board?
Yes, ma'am. No, I wasn't.
Why didn't you comply with your treatment plan?
Because there was administrating urinalysis tests, and I knew I couldn't pass them all the time.
What, say that again?
They were administrating urinalysis tests, and I couldn't pass them all the time.
Well, my point is, Mr. Sheppard, you spent 30 years in prison. I'm assuming you went through the substance abuse treatment program while you were incarcerated. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
I'm certain that before the board released you, they asked you about your sobriety, what your plans were to stay sober.
Yes, ma'am, they did.
Convince the board that you understood your need for treatment and that you would follow through with your substance abuse treatment program. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Failed to do so.
Yes, ma'am, I did. But I failed because this was like hands-on experience. It's not like being in Angola where I had just books and, where I was actually vice president of the AA program there. I studied it, I lived it, I taught it. But when you're out on the street, it's a different story. You face different situations. It's constantly there with you. You go into a convenience store, it's there.
You were told that when you were interviewed.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I was.
And you just kind of walked away from it very shortly after being released.
as I said, it was just, the experience itself, seeing it there with you every day, being in situations with it constantly, I mean, you don't understand the mental obsession, the obsession of it. It's not an addiction at that point. It's just an obsession, that I had. And at times, I just let it overwhelm me. I didn't realize I was already giving into the obsession because at the time I was just really looking around at people who were similar like me, who were enjoying life, who owned their own homes and who had their own businesses, some of them. And I'm sitting among them and sharing the same air. And I didn't see the difference when one beer would do to me. And I took,
At some point, you went to a treatment program in Marksville. Which one was that?
that was the one in Denham Springs.
Well, at one point, you told the parole officer that the reason that you weren't at the residence that you were supposed to be at was that you were in a treatment program in Marksville.
That was the last one I was at, Marksville.
Talk about Denham Springs. Where did you go in Denham Springs and when were you there?
I was there in March and April. March, April, and May. It was somewhere in 3 months there.
How did you end up there?
I had gotten into a fight with my best friend, and I felt at that point there that this was getting out of hand, and I needed to seek treatment.
You intoxicated when you had this fight with your friend?
Yes, ma'am.
So what facility did you go to?
Wood Lake in Denham Springs.
You stayed there how long?
30 days.
And when you discharged, did you follow through on the aftercare that they recommended?
No, ma'am.
Not.
I had a place to stay with a friend.
What does that got to do with your following through on treatment recommendations?
Well, because I didn't really think I had a problem at this time. Even though I was admitted to that place, I admitted myself. Sitting in these meetings, I was listening to people who had been at these programs 5 or 6, 7, 8 times, who had OD'd 5 or 6 times themselves, and how I was thinking to myself that I was just a person who had a few beers and a situation that got out of hand.
So, Mr. Sheppard, all those years of facilitating AA meetings, you didn't have any more insight into your addiction than that?
No, it's not. It's that I had the insight. It's just that, I don't know. I mean, it's just, when you're sitting and you're faced with these calls to make, I just didn't really feel that I was a part of that disease. I just thought,
If you facilitated and participated in AA, there is no way that you would think that you weren't part of that disease.
well, I wouldn't say.
When did you get arrested for the first DWI?
That was 2020, November.
And tell us about that incident.
I decided to come up here and visit my family and for the Thanksgiving holidays, and I was driving back from Shreveport a Saturday night, and I got pulled over for making a wrong turn.
Well, you wouldn't get a DWI for making a wrong turn. Tell me about your drinking.
It was the Thanksgiving holidays, and we was just all sitting around having a few beers, and I decided to leave my cousin in his house and come back to my sister in his house, and I had a few beers. I had about a 6-pack.
How long did you stay in jail after that arrest?
I bailed out that same night.
When did you go to the second treatment program?
That was in around September
Of
2021.
And what program was that?
That was another Wood Lake.
And where was that?
Excuse me?
Where was it?
That was in Abbeville, Louisiana.
How long did you stay there?
30 days.
Did you follow through on the treatment recommendation the second time?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
So what did you do? How did you follow through?
This particular time, I actually applied myself. I went in there and I quit using smokeless tobacco because I wanted to understand the mental obsession that the alcohol has. And the only way for me to understand that is to have some type of withdrawal from something. So smokeless tobacco was my experiment. So I quit smokeless tobacco and
So tell me again, when did you go to the program in Abbeville?
that was in September,
Of
Oh.
20,
September, August, somewhere in there.
and yet you got arrested for another DWI on November 2nd of 21 in Natchitoches. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Explain that.
I was staying at a sober living and I had an aunt that died and they were bringing her back in from New York to bury her in Bossier City. And I made several calls to my sister to see if I could get a ride up there, and because I didn't have no license and that wasn't possible. I couldn't get a hold of her. So I just went ahead and took off on my truck, and I was living at a sober living home and I hadn't been drinking, and
Had been drinking?
I haven't been drinking.
Oh,
I
if
hadn't been
you,
drinking for them 2 months.
Right.
And,
how did you get a DWI?
huh?
How did you get a DWI arrest on November 2nd of 2021?
Well, I pulled over and bought some beer and a couple of beers had me had me swerving.
You left the sober living house to go to Shreveport, and you stopped on your way to buy some beers.
Yes, ma'am.
What about your not advising the parole officer of your moves from place to place? They can never verify any of the places that you claim to have been living in.
In hindsight, I actually could have did that better, but I was moving from place to place because I was trying to get treatment and I was also trying to maintain a better job than I had. I also took it for granted that my address had been approved. So
Take it for granted if you had not been, if you weren't keeping in contact with the parole officer for them to let you know whether it had been approved.
but prior to this incident here, prior to my request for an address change, I hadn't seen my parole officer since the incident with my first DWI. You know, and it was on the impression then that, you know, I'm doing a good job, that as long as I keep paying.
Why had you not seen your parole officer? It's your responsibility to contact that person.
Yes, ma'am, and I did. You know, we talked, but we never saw each other in person. You know, we talked a couple times over the phone.
Again, you could have found out over the phone about your residence plan.
Right. Well, I did make several calls, but I never was able to get through.
Thank you, Mr. Sheppard. You were not saying all I have. Mr. Freddie.
Okay, I know you were probably on maximum supervision being a juvenile lifer. I worked for probation for over 35 years. You never tried, I know they read you your condition. You had to know you needed to stay in touch with them. You can't sit there and tell me you didn't know you needed to stay in touch with them. What was the problem? You just thought you could do and go where you wanted?
No, sir, I didn't. Like I said, I took it for granted that that my address has been approved and I was transferred to Baton Rouge. And I did go see a parole officer in Baton Rouge at the PO, at the probation office, and also seen Ms. Nancy Moffett. And I stayed in contact with Louisiana Pro Project.
You
So
stayed in
all the
contact
time-
with the Pro Project. You left there after 3 weeks. Did they know about your DWIs? Contact?
Yeah, I was in contact with him. Yes, sir, I was.
Contact your probation office and let them know you got these DWIs?
Yes, sir.
And they didn't issue a warrant for you right then?
No, sir. I mean, Ms. Heather had told me that she was the reason why I was out, and that as long as I continue paying my fees and my and staying.
Okay, also you had 2 treatments, yet you still got DWI. So what are you gonna tell me to make me believe that another treatment will stop you from going out there? That's like going out there with a gun, driving around drunk. So what you gonna tell me to make me believe that another treatment's gonna help?
I mean, there's no short thing about the success of another treatment. I mean, I've been in 2 rehabs, and the first one I didn't even apply myself to because I didn't think I had a problem. The second one, I applied myself. I went to the after treatment programs. I quit smokeless tobacco just to prove to myself that I can try to overcome the mental obsession. But to say that there's any sure assurance I can give you right now, I can't, because I sit in these programs with these people and I listen to them talk about 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and how they had to have this treatment because they didn't have no place to go, or, it was to the bottom of the line. But what I can tell you is that, I'm not going to never give up. I'm not going to ever be in a situation where I don't have a place to go or I don't have money in my pocket. I will always seek to better myself as far as the treatment program comes, but to say that, to give you any kind of assurance would be like a lie, because I can't or anybody else can. This is a disease, and I am trying, I am doing my best with it now, and I feel the treatment that they're talking about now is a faith-based program, and it's something that's going to keep me off the alcohol for 12 to 18 months, and that's what I need.
You'll be there in 2 weeks and start getting riding to the funeral.
Say it again.
No further questions.
All right, I don't have any questions. Can we hear from Mr. Myers?
Yes, good morning. Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. I'd like to let it be known that Mr. Sheppard has been in contact. Our case management continues when someone leaves our program in our residential program. Mr. Sheppard came to us specifically when he was in St. John Parish and said he needed help, and we were able to arrange that treatment program, that 30-day treatment program. After that, I specifically notified Parole Officer Nancy Moffett in Baton Rouge. After he got out of that program, he needed a place to go. We helped arrange that also, to a place to live at Joseph Homes, and Ms. Moffett was notified, and he actually attended meetings at Joseph Homes that she was there. He obviously had to go into another treatment program. There was another problem, and he did notify, and I notified her. We have text messages that corroborate that. There is a lag period. There's a significant, sometimes 30, 45 days lag period when you're transferring paperwork. Mr. Sheppard had moved multiple times in a short period of time, and things just didn't catch up. I don't see any intent to abscond or not report any. There was a lot of confusion as he was trying to seek treatment, and there was also the lag in paperwork. And he did, in fact, along with me, notify Ms. Moffett, who's also in conversations I've had with her, has agreed, if this board would like to contact her, has agreed to corroborate that.
Lovely.
Thank you, Andrew Hundley, Louisiana Parole Project. Few things I'd like to point out. One, when Richard was released to Parole Project in 2019, our organization was much different than it is today. And I don't say that as excuses, just, to be honest and frank about how our organization's grown in capacity and how we've applied what we've learned to continue to improve our program. Whenever he was released, we didn't own any properties. We were renting apartments at Joseph Homes. We had a staff of 4 of us at that time. Today, our capacity is significantly grown. We own and operate multiple properties. So we don't have clients who are coming in and going so quick through our program. We have 18 people on staff today, including a social worker, attorneys, more reentry specialists. So we have a much more professional operation. So I say that to say, I recognize in a world if Rickey would have come home today versus a few years ago, he would have received, better services from our organization. And I want to say that because I've got to believe Ms. Jackson, Mr. Freeman, Ms. Renats are thinking, well, Parole Project came before us in 2019 with a plan. What's different today? And I'd like to say, we are much different today. And when I sit before you and say that we're committed to helping Rickey moving forward, it's a different commitment than we stated, a few years ago. So that's the first thing I would like to point out. Second thing, this is a very important case to us, as this board's aware. There have been, more than 90 juvenile lifers released over the last several years. And unfortunately, Rickey is the first person who sits before you in that group at a revocation hearing. So this is a very sobering moment for us. And I know it's a moment that you all take very seriously. I recognize that while, if he's revoked today, there is a process in the future that he can be considered, for a second chance. But just the frankness and the honesty of the situation is, if he's revoked, it's hard to see. Future boards will always look at him as someone who had a life sentence, who got a second chance. Why should we, give you this second chance and take a chance on you? And I think today is probably his best opportunity to get one more chance. The third thing, and you're just echoing what Carrie said, I'm very aware, and we don't want to be in conflict with probation and parole. We have a good working relationship with probation and parole. I would say that, one way that we've grown since 2019 is we keep in communication with parole officers our organization's much better known by the department, probation and parole, especially. So we keep in, constant communication. And I think if we had another opportunity, the communication would be better. But Rickey, Rickey never absconded, and I can tell you that we were in communication with him, and we did our best to communicate with our contacts in probation and parole about where Rickey was in these various times. Ms. Pascarella is going to speak to you about our reentry plan for Rickey. What I can tell you is, from a personal observation, I can tell you this time is much different. One of the most significant reasons is he's been in jail for 10 months. None of the times before when he slipped up was he incarcerated. So this has been a big wake-up call, and this is his rock bottom. And so this is a different situation than the other times before. You're going to be presented a plan that's a 12 to 18 month plan. And what I'll tell you is, once he's released from that program, Parole Project commits to providing case management to Rickey for a minimum of 1 year past that. But we're also willing to honor any commitments that this board may make, as it relates to, conditions for his parole. If Rickey's returned to prison, I don't believe that he's going to receive the treatment that he needs in prison. When Rickey is not using alcohol, Rickey is an outstanding person. And I say that not just from having been around him, but speaking to people who have employed him and who have attested to his work ethic and his personality when he is not drinking. So what we ask the board is to give us another chance, even if it's a final chance, to address his alcoholism in a very much more structured program and intense program than we have tried before with Rickey, with the understanding that he has hit rock bottom and he's been incarcerated for the last 10 months for the mistakes he's made. And we stand by ready to answer any questions that you may have regarding our plan for him. And thank you for listening to us today.
Ms. Pascarella, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I do really want to thank the committee for your thought and consideration to Rickey and his situation. It's a serious one. And I know that it is your genuine desire to see Rickey healthy and thriving in the community, and it is ours, obviously. I don't want to overdo it, but I do want to just say a couple of things about the change in address. I think, in talking with Rickey, and the reason why he pled guilty to that violation is because he recognizes that if nothing else, all of the moving around doesn't really work for parole supervision. And part of all the moving around was a result of the drinking. It was going to rehab, it was changing jobs, but it was also going to rehab and drinking. The communication could have been better, but I just want to repeat that as I understand it, and I have seen in the record and tried to lay it out in my letter, he was keeping various people informed. He was in touch with Nancy Moffett in Baton Rouge on a number of occasions. I've provided her number to the committee in our letter because she's offered to be a resource to the committee should that be necessary. And obviously he was in touch with staff from LPP about his whereabouts. And it was our understanding even from Ms. Moffett that she had communicated with Ms. Pennington, who was the Donaldson Mill parole officer. I know, having been a public defender and worked very closely with parole and probation officers, how busy they are. And I will just say I have called Ms. Pennington on many occasions and never once gotten in touch with her. So it's not to say that she's doing anything wrong, but just that I do think sometimes communication can be challenging. And I know that Rickey had made efforts to communicate with whom he could communicate with. And so in Ms. Moffett's words, I don't think there was any intentional absconding. However, there are things that Rickey needs to do better should he be given another opportunity. I think everyone is very clear about that. I want to talk obviously about the addiction and the problems that caused. But as Andrew just alluded to, I don't want to ignore some of the real successes that Rickey had. And I do think it's important to talk about those a little bit because it gives us a window into his potential and ability to be very successful and to thrive on parole should he get this addiction under control. And he did have real successes. He was making an honest living. He was supporting himself. He was saving money. As you saw in my letter, I spoke to a number of his employers who spoke glowingly about his work ethic and his attitude. Honestly, I could only wish that my employers would gush about me the way that these folks gushed about him. I honestly have never heard anything like it. They were very aware of his current situation. They were very aware of his challenges. But as you saw in my letter, they described him as one of the best people, as a person that they wish that they could replicate in their work environments because he was such a blessing to have around. And so what we know is that if he can get his addiction under control, he would be very, very successful on parole. But obviously that's the key. And I certainly can understand the questioning and the concerns around why AA didn't support AA in prison, didn't support him, why it didn't give him the tools to succeed this time. And I think those are very legitimate concerns and concerns that we have thought about and talked about and share. What I can say is that obviously we all know this is a real disease for Rickey. It's a disease that runs in his family. We have to remember that Rickey went to prison drinking, but at 16 years old. And he spent 34 years, as he said, sort of reading the books about it. And yes, that should give him some tools, but I think exiting prison for the first time as an adult having to learn how to cope with this disease that is everywhere around him and his family, it provided new challenges. And the other thing I want to share about that is that even over the last 10 or 11 months that I have been working with Rickey, I've seen a change in him, and I've seen him really embrace the sort of gravity of his disease, of his situation, of what it has cost him, and the need to do something very different, to do more than the 30-day programs. And that's why we have come up with this plan that is really at his request. I hope you saw in the letter that we have located and found a 12 to 18-month residential program for him. We did that because we think that length of time is important, that level of intensive treatment is what he needs at this point, and is what will give him the potential to succeed in our community. We have, as Andrew noted, hired a social worker in the last couple of months, Ms. Nediger, who's here, in the case that she can answer any questions of the committee, but she has also been working with Rickey. I hope you saw in the letter that they've developed a sobriety plan. They have been doing counseling, and she has been in touch with the Adult and Teen Challenge, the program that we've located, about her ongoing support for him, even while he's in that program, which she's committed to doing. And of course, she's committed to continuing to provide him counseling and support services herself upon his completion of rehab, if he's permitted to do that. And obviously we would too. So, I think the summary here is that as a team that includes Rickey, I think today we have all the components in place that we need to make this work. Rickey has reached a place where he understands how serious this problem is. And we at LPP have increased resources to give Rickey the attention and services that he needs. And we are all completely committed to his success, as you can tell by the number of staff people who are here, sort of wrapping our arms around him, wanting to make this work. This commitment to the 12 to 18-month program isn't a small commitment on his part, and he really wants to do this. And I'm convinced in his genuine desire to do this because he knows that he needs to prioritize his sobriety above all else. I think the bottom line is that Rickey has now a set of services available to him should he be given another opportunity. I believe, and I think we all believe, that those services will ensure his success, and we're confident that he will do well if he's given another opportunity. And we thank you for your consideration of our proposal. Of course, we welcome any further conversation about anything that we've talked about today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your comments, your remarks, and your plan. Rickey, is there anything you'd like to say to us before we vote?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to say this. When I got out, there's a lot of things I had to discover about myself, and I made a few bad decisions along the way. But the thing is that, I discovered that I had a thing where I was spontaneous, and had this childlike mentality, and I didn't really have nobody to control that. I just, when I took off, like my truck, got this truck, and I had 100,000 miles on it within 2.5 years. I went from Shreveport to Grand Isle, from DeRitter to Kentwood. I walked the streets of Shreveport. I walked the streets of New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette. I went to city parks, state parks. What I'm saying is that, I understand what I'm about to lose, and I couldn't believe that I couldn't say no to drinking. It's not saying that I can't control this, but what I'm saying is now when I'm sitting in these cells and I got nothing else to do but think about what I put on the line, it's a different story. I got much to look at now. When I came to prison 37 years ago, I didn't have these experiences. I was happy to get up because I had a job. I was happy when I came in because I was paying my bills. I was paying my fees. All I can say is that I can and will do better if given a chance, another chance. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You prepared to vote? Mrs. Jackson? Mr. Sheppard?
Yes, sir.
parole project intently. They talked about everything that they're going to do. Nobody can do this for you. Nobody can do this for you. And your expectation is that everybody's going to ride in on a white horse and rescue you from the mess up that you've made. When you walked out of that prison in 2019, you left behind a lot of men who would have given anything for the privilege that you were given. You immediately got into difficulty with the people who helped you get out, provided you a place to live, bought you a truck, and within a month, they had to put you out of their home because you were threatening them. You went back to drinking. Although you said that you had learned so much when you were in prison and you were equipped to get out, that wasn't true. That wasn't true. You could very well have killed someone as a result of your drinking and driving. And that could have had such a tragic consequence, not just for you and the person that you might have killed, but all of those men in prison whose opportunity might be taken away from them because you blew the opportunity that you were given. That's inexcusable. That is absolutely inexcusable. So these legislations can be undone just the way they were created. And you would be a poster child for undoing those laws that have benefited so many other people. I don't feel sorry for you. I find that you have violated the conditions of your parole. And my vote today is to revoke that parole. And I would suggest your enrollment in the Steve Hoyle Long-Term Substance Abuse Treatment Program. Some people can't make it on the outside. And maybe you're one of those people. I don't know. But my vote today is to revoke your parole, send you back to prison, and recommend your placement in the Steve Hoyle Long-Term Substance Abuse Treatment Program. Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Okay, first off, I'd like to say to Mr. Hunley and Mr. Myers, we do appreciate everything y'all do for people that get out. I mean, a lot of times I base my decisions on what y'all have to say and what y'all have to offer. You know, 90 successes and one failure, that's a great odds. That's great. But I just can't see letting this man go with 2 DWIs, 2 chances at treatment, living in sober living. The minute he rides out, he starts drinking again. So I also vote to revoke with the recommendation that he go to Steve Hall.
All right, Sheppard, I've listened intently to the things you have to say. I know you have regret. What has struck me though is you keep speaking of your mental obsession with alcohol. Even though you acknowledge it's a disease, but it is a disease. You have an addiction. And until you get that under control, I believe you are a public safety risk. You demonstrated that you are because you get in the car. You threaten the folks that were good to you. My vote today, I agree with my colleagues, also is to revoke with the recommendation that you be enrolled in Steve Boyle program, which will help you tremendously. And you will have the opportunity to reapply for another parole hearing. We'll send you instructions on how and when to do that. But today, sir, your parole's been revoked. Good luck.
Thank you.
Let's unpack that. You know, I'm not sure to be more frustrated or upset with Rickey would be more frustrated and upset with the parole project. You know, like Miss Jackson said, legislation can be undone just as quickly as it can be put together, and he would have been the poster child for destroying this legislation. We don't have his hearing because it took place in 2017 before it was before they were doing these on YouTube. But there are some records of him being denied before he was approved. The idea that he's given a life sentence and within 1 month of getting out, he is kicked out of the home of the people who stood up for him. And they didn't just randomly jump into the picture. You're talking about a relationship that was built over the period of years. Now, I do want to share an interesting tidbit about this hearing. I had initially saw this hearing before I started doing YouTube recordings, and it was a hearing that stuck out to me. Out of the many that I've seen before, it stuck out to me, and I couldn't find it. I wanted to find it to do this recording, and then out of the blue, Claire sent me an email and said, "Mandu, you have to do this hearing." And I said, "I cannot believe it, Claire, but I've been looking for this hearing." So thank you, Claire. And then thank you, Richard, for sharing additional information on it. So they write here, he's making the most after his life of incarceration. Part 2, good news from Smart Crime in Louisiana. Now, this all originates, the idea that someone who would get life came out of the Louisiana's 2017 criminal justice reform, where Governor John Bell Edwards signed it, the most comprehensive criminal justice reform, and also where I believe it was the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional to lock juvenile lifers up for life. And the only thing you need to get this stuff to stop happening is for a story like this, where he goes into a car drinking and takes and wipes out a family, just takes a life. It will very quickly end it for everyone else. The road to restoration can seem endless for a man incarcerated over 3 decades. A foolish juvenile makes mistakes. Juvenile mistakes turn deadly, and suddenly they're saddled with life in prison without parole. Some men succumb to isolation, some become respondent, but he looked for hope. So the way it started in Arkansas, they stole an 18-wheeler. He and his friend ended up driving from Arkansas to Louisiana, trying to find a bus fare to return across state lines. So they broke into a stranger's home, and when the homeowner came home and caught him, a deadly tussle ensued, and Sheppard went to prison for first-degree red rum. Then they say that he started immediately with his life of rehabilitation. And then this is the interesting thing. While incarcerated, he started exchanging letters with Donna Miller. This is the family that they were talking about, the Miller family that took him in, that bought him a truck. And it took just 1 month before they kicked him out. They had started writing letters for years. She runs the Humble Heart Association. It's a prison ministry. After 3 years of back and forth letters, Miller attended a church service put on by the Assembly of God of Angola. By chance, she ran into Sheppard in the prison yard while at the service. And she says, I feel like God has us right where we're supposed to be, Miller says. Miller's husband, Joe, an electrician in Des Allemands, Louisiana, was first skeptical of the entire situation, but he ultimately trusted his wife's judgment. Dawn is a believer in people, and she met Rick 7 or 8 years ago, and they hit it off really well, Joe says. My wife is an excellent judge of character. So, I mean, you're talking like 7, 8 years ago. After 4 years of getting to know Sheppard, Donna believed in his changed heart and convinced her husband that the couple needed to sponsor Sheppard upon his release. Since Sheppard finally walked out of the prison on February 14th, 2019, the Millers have surrounded him with support, helping him in the process of securing 2 jobs in construction and also at a restaurant. Yeah, they might want to remove this article. Smart on crime, donate. I mean, he gets out and pretty much instantly he's kicked out of their house because he threatened them. Then he gets 2 DUIs. He spends a night in prison. He gets sent to a 30-day rehabilitation. He goes to sober living because he's kicked out of his home here. At this beautiful family that put it all on the line, where she had to convince her husband to trust him, where, I mean, everything that they did for him, it took just 1 month before he actually threatened them. Then he gets a DUI. Then he gets another DUI. And, you know, this whole process sadly makes me question so many of these great commutation hearings that we see where the inmate gets up and they say, I've been going to AA, and they do the whole speech and they do everything great. He was vice president of AA in Angola. He wasn't just going there. He was vice president. I thought that meant something. But then but what did it mean? I mean, even he was saying, I need to do more programs. I need more time. We need to, Jill gets up and says, we need to send him to a 12 to 8 month program. He spent 34 years reading books about it, but now he has to do more than that. It's like, he spent 34 years in a giant program. What do you mean now you want the answers to send them somewhere for 12 to 18 months? It doesn't make sense. The idea that everyone from the Parole Project would get up there and stand there with a straight face and say all of the reasons why he should get another chance after he proved to everyone that he doesn't deserve another chance is just shocking to me. He had everything. He had a loving family that really like adopted him and bought him a truck. He had all the resources. He had jobs. And then he just starts drinking. And not just drinking, but drinking and driving. And you would think after the first time you got caught and you spent the night in jail, you would be under this like terror of, oh my gosh, this all could have ended for me. I am so lucky. But it took him just another month to get in a car while driving. He leaves his sober living home while driving, picks up a 6-pack. So he drives in the car. It's impossible to understand. He has everything on the line. He is backing a life sentence. And I get it that he can come and try to say what he wants to say, but to have the whole parole project sit there in his defense is just insulting to everyone else, in my opinion. It's disgusting. No, he doesn't deserve another chance. What would 12 to 18 months do? And it was under your watch that you even sent him to just a 30-day program after his first DUI. He said it took just, how are you overlooking? It took 1 month for him to get kicked out of the home of the family that adopted him, that had invested like 8 years of their lives in taking him, that said that they're going to sponsor him, and he threatened them. Why is he someone worthy of risking the rights for every other juvenile to get out? It makes no sense. You know, surprisingly, the data is not bad. There are 90 juvenile lifers that had been gotten out so far, and this is our first revocation. That's pretty incredible. And it only adds more. Like, he obviously proven that his maturity level is like 0. It just doesn't make sense. Here's where they talk about the crime. He was indicted in first degree. This is part of his appeal, that it was an illegal sentence. His co-defendant was 15. He went to commit a burglary in August 1984. Moore was 61 years old. He returned home during the robbery, and a struggle ensued, and he was fatally stabbed. The knife was found in the vehicle, along with items taken from his home. In January 1985, the defendant pled guilty. Oh, here it is. In 2012, the United States Supreme Court held Miller that the 8th Amendment was prohibited against cruel and unusual punishment, forbids sentencing schemes that mandate life without possibility of parole for juveniles under the age of 18. You know, I am glad, of course, relieved. What should I say? It was in the parole project. It felt like they were spending so much time talking about the absconding issue. Oh, he didn't abscond. It was, you know, Jill even brought up, I've tried to contact the parole officer. I'm not throwing her under the bus, but it's difficult. I'm like, that's not even the main issue. Like, the main issue, just look at how poorly he has done. And I wish that my employers would talk about that way about me. And it's like, what are you talking about? How well do you think his employers, how happy do you think his employers are? He over the course of the short period he was out, he's had 2 DUIs. He had to go away for a month into rehab. He spent 9 months in jail. I mean, how much time did he even spend working for them? You're like insulting our intelligence. Find me an employer that's okay with their employee not showing up months out of the year. And it's just insulting to everyone that the Pearl Project would put the most basic common sense on the line for what? He's clearly not deserving of it. It's putting at risk everything for everyone else so you can make a few bucks. Like, I don't understand that. He said, it's even the things that he was saying, I just thought I'm hanging out with friends and they have jobs. Some of them have their own companies and their homes, and I just thought I could be like them and have a beer. And it's like, well, how do you have those answers and you were vice president of AA? And again, it just I don't know if I'm going in circles here, but it does make me question, sadly, everything that I'll hear from any other inmate that talks about AA and their involvement in it, because it makes you really wonder if it's just if they get it. And I know it's not fair to judge one person on another, but seeing this revocation versus other revocations is much more disheartening. And call me naive, but I mean, it's just, love to hear your thoughts. If he has not come back for parole, he will have a chance for parole again, because they did commute his sentence, so he doesn't have. So he will, he will have another chance of parole. I don't know when it will happen, though. It's going to be very hard to imagine a parole board ever letting him out. I think that's one thing I can agree with what the Parole Project said today, because, like Mr. Freeman said, it's like going out with a gun when you're getting in that car and you just can't risk it. It's not fair to anyone. And he has simply proven that he has no ability to what's in his best interest. Forget the public's best interest. But with that, I'll let you go.